Climbing the Pocket Network presents Jason and the Boys talking everything Minnesota Vikings. Watch the countdown timer.
Away we go again. Lost like I'm lost on purpose. If found, please return to. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home, Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home, My vision blurry, I'm paying the cost. I'm not enough. In fact, it's even better when you're not involved. When I miss your call, I feel that I evolve. Cause at your mention, I am more dependent than a college student on their parents or an old person on their pension. Not to mention, when you hit me on WhatsApp without attention and a bad booty bitch watched and she looks tempting. Look, my Achilles heel is when I said what I feel, you said, baby, come home, and I don't think that I will, cause all this motherfucking stress is gonna get me killed. Woo. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home, Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home,
Huddle around as Climbing the Pocket Network presents Jason and the Boys talking everything Minnesota Vikings.
No, I can't play these games. No, you can't disrespect and call me names. Sending me signals like you about to switch lanes. Well, go on, do your thing. Go on, do your thing. I mix champagne and propane, get lit. I'm trying to forget all the things that you said, all the things that we did. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home, Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road. I've been here before when I get home, Watch the breakdown. And I get home when I get home. You just gonna act like we normal now. Good luck. Don't you try to call me with that bullshit, telling me you're sorry. You act too quick. That's somebody else's problem now. You're somebody else's problem now. Don't you try to call me with that bullshit, telling me you're sorry. You act too quick. That's somebody else's problem now. You're somebody else's problem now.
Oh my goodness. We are back. We are live. We got a different crew, but it's a full crew all the same because they're all part of the CTP family. My name is Jason Brown. You can find me on Twitter at BrownJason. And we're just going to go. We got to start with the man who's normally in the truck. Today, he's out in front of the camera showing off the background. Dave, my man, how you doing? How you been?
I'm doing good. And do you know they put on pads today? Woohoo! That means the offense and defensive linemen got to hit. I love it.
I mean, it could mean some other things, but we'll talk about that too. And next up, you know him as Fries Football Fridays. We just know him as Matt. My man, how you been?
Doing fantastic, Jason. Just got off of vacation last week, so I was down at the beach for a refreshing time. And we're back. We're ready to go. We're ready for training camp.
Let's go. What's up, Mary? How you doing? And last, certainly not least, the man, the myth, the legend, the Flip Mozzie. My man.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going well. You know, we got Nick, Eric, and Miles in COVID protocol. So So we got the Jake Browning, the Danny Etling, and the Case Kukas here with y'all to lead you through the Tuesday show. We'll do our best, Coach Jason.
We got this. We got this. I don't understand why everybody. No, we're not going to get into it. Actually, yes, we are going to get into all of that right now. So, Flip, I'm going to just go. I'm going to throw it right back to you because obviously, training camp's going on. And if you haven't been already, there he is, our friend Matt Anderson. About to give him a shout out because he's been putting in work through training camp, aggregating, curating all of the things that are going on in and around camp to make sure that you know which players are trending up, trending down. So make sure you head on over to climbingthepocket.com, check out the great work being done by Matt Anderson. But unfortunately, right before what is often the biggest practice of training camp, people get very hyped for it. You got Saturday night practice. Things kind of went to shit in and around our team, which I guess is something that we should be accustomed to, but we got to talk about it because it brought something that in and of itself shouldn't be political, I don't think, but it's brought something that has become very political into the sphere of sports and football, where people often come for a refuge from those things, and it is, of course, vaccinations. And on Saturday, we found out that, I guess right before Saturday's practice, we found out Kellen Mond had in fact contracted COVID. Kirk Cousins was a close contact and would not be able to play because he's not vaccinated. And, Jake Browning, he got his shot. It has brought us Case Kukas, and Etling. But it's also made Mike Zimmer more ornery than usual. And he's preaching a message that, based on the numbers that have come out, even, I guess, today, that it does not seem is really making its way or resonating within the team. So, Flip, I know that's really the angle that you really focused on when we were talking about this offline was not the politics of it, but just really the division that can be caused when the coach is asking players to do something that, just from purely a football standpoint, would give the team a competitive advantage. And what it looks like, a high percentage of players on this team, when compared to like the broader NFL cohort, are choosing to not do that thing. And like Zimmer had said, if this had happened in a regular season game, the Vikings would be in rough shape.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Jason. And I don't think we need to rehash all the way back to Saturday. It happened. We're closer to Kellen Mond and Kirk Cousins getting cleared to come back than we are to when they went out. And the guys on the Unbelievable podcast, BJ Rydell and Drew who I need to learn how to pronounce his last name, but Drew Mahode, they did a fantastic job of breaking down exactly why this angers Mike Zimmer so much. It's, again, about following league rules and how following those rules can set you up for success in the year to come. This is different in 2020. In 2020, the rules were surrounding protocols to mask and social distance and stay out of public areas when traveling. And the Vikings were on par or even better with the rest of the league in following those protocols. This year, the protocols are different. The rules are different. And the Vikings are dead last compared to other teams. 64% vaccinated, 32 unvaccinated players. I would be completely fine with those numbers if it were league average. But when you look around the league, the Vikings have 3 to 4 times as many unvaccinated players as the rest of the NFL. You look at teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending champions, they're 98% vaccinated. So are we going to be able to compete with the rest of the NFL doing things differently? That's the first thing that worries me, talking about the fan experience. The second thing is what Jason mentioned, is clearly we have an issue here where the head coach is thinking very differently about things than the players. And that always concerns me when the head coach and the players are not on the same page. You think about past Super Bowl champions, you think about Bruce Arians and the relationship he had with his players, Andy Reid. You can go back all the way to Bill Belichick and even Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak in their time in Denver. They all just speak effusively about their coach, and the coach speaks just effusively about their players. It's a bond that those two entities make that enables them to build a culture that lets a team contend for a Super Bowl. Here in Minnesota, it just doesn't seem like we have that right now. And so that's what worries me the most. It's not so much about the specific issue. It's not about the science or the politics that this is such a hot item. It's just the fact that our coach is saying something. Our coach, it's his job to put players in a position to win football games. And the players that he's telling this to have a very different idea about how this season should be run. So that's just something that we're going to have to monitor all season, because it's hard to win when people aren't on the same page.
Yeah, so Dave, I want to get you in because, obviously this is something that as the story was unfolding, Twitter was blowing up. We were obviously talking about it in the group chat. And a point in this that maybe it's difficult for some fans to really reconcile is, football players will do so many things and make so many sacrifices. You'll hear about, Ronnie Lott, cut the finger off so I can get back in the game, and players being shot up with who knows what on the sidelines so they can get back in there and compete in situations that, they probably shouldn't be competing if we're thinking about like their long-term health as like the primary thing, as the primary driver of their decision-making, right?
Yeah.
And so you have something where like you look at all these things, all these crazy things, all these times where football players will, do whatever it takes to give their team a chance to win. And then you have to reconcile it with what we seem to be having with the Vikings, where the NFL, yes, they're definitely pushing in a certain way to get, what they're giving teams a competitive advantage. And so by doing so are incentivizing players to get the vaccine. And so can you help us reconcile this point where, on the one hand, football players generally seem programmed to do every and anything they can to help their teams win, sometimes to the detriment of themselves, versus kind of where we are now, where Mike Zimmer, he almost seems exasperated because he's like, hey, this will help us win. And players are like, nah, we're not going to do that.
No, he is exasperated. One, because obviously it's a team thing. He believes in the team, and everybody being vaccinated puts you under the less restrict COVID protocols where you're only tested once every 2 weeks. You could be around people that have popped, but you can still practice and do everything normal, i.e. Jake Browning. That gives the team the advantage, especially when he's gathered such a good team, at least on paper, together, where we have stars on the offense. And there's plenty of those. And some are coming in to be even bigger. And then we have guys on the defense that are proving themselves, right? Just to throw it away for what you have the right to do, your own personal belief, right? You can believe whatever you want, but if you're doing that, it's against what the team's goal is. And as Flip states, we want to put a Super Bowl winning team together and everybody be on the same page. It's hard to do that when you're doing something that could put you off that page, i.e. like Kirk Cousins not being out there practicing. Now, it's good for Jake Browning. I'm glad it's happened for him because he stepped up. He's gotten in a groove. He's proven that he can do it. That's good. I think he's won the QB2 slot, straight out. But as the team as a whole, this is going to come back to us every single week of the season. And what it can do is it can hurt us because somebody can pop with COVID or be around somebody with COVID. If they're not vaccinated, they instantly have to go into the quarantine and they're out for 5 days. And that could be over an important game where they're needed to win. Now, individuals have the right to choose or not choose. It could be political, religious. It could be medical. They could believe that there's medical reasons. The vaccines are experimental. They do not have long-term FDA approval. There's all sorts of reasons somebody could choose not to get it. Adam Thielen can say, hey, I got COVID last year. I have the antibodies. Why do I need it? There's all sorts of reasons. But whatever they are, if you're choosing not to, you are hurting the team effort. In the military, we'd get all sorts of shots. All sorts of shots. During the Gulf War, I have my shot record, and we got 2 shots. One said shot A, and the other one said shot B. Right? And they were early anthrax stuff, is what I'm convinced they were. But
you don't even know.
I don't even know. After the war, I came back and what were these? And they go, they were experimental. We don't know what they were. You just got, but it was all for the team effort. You did not let the team down. You didn't say, no, I'm not doing this. You signed up for it. I feel playing football, you sign up for it. If you don't want to do that, then quit. That's hard to say, but we're here for the team. You're here for the team. You're not. Yes, there's a little bit of I'm here for me. I'm here to make my money and make my career. But it's a team sport. And when everybody's working together, you all win and you all get paid more and you all do better rather than looking out for number one. And that's why Mike Zimmer is frustrated, because he wants everybody to do well on this team.
Whew. David coming out spitting fire out the gate. So, Matt, I know that's a tough act to follow because Dave was fired up there. How do you see us coming to a resolution, given, like, I know Flip and others have pointed out, like, Zim doesn't get fired up and talk this publicly about things all that often, but he's been going pretty hard on this one. How do you see this one going? Do you think there's anything that can happen before the season starts that gets us to a place where this maybe is resolved? Or do you think something will have to go sideways in season before we can get maybe everyone on the same page with this?
Yeah, so I think the only thing that'll happen prior to the season has already happened that would make a change, right? I think the Zimmer press conference is as explosive as you're going to get from this situation right now, right? Because obviously our starting quarterback is missing 5 days of training camp, which are important to install the entirety of the offense, essentially, right? So it's a critical moment for a player to be missing time, but the only time you could be more critical is if a player misses a game due to the COVID situation. And I think that is potentially when it would blow up, is if we have, and I wouldn't say it's a player who gets COVID, because you can have breakthrough cases, right? You're less likely to have a breakthrough case than you are to get it if you're unvaccinated, but you can still have breakthrough cases. I can't blame an individual for getting COVID, right? I'm saying, but what the players do control is the 5-day period of time that they miss if they're unvaccinated, right? That's the control between the difference of them being vaccinated and unvaccinated. So that is when it potentially blows up, if a player has to go on COVID IR because of this.
Yeah, again, this is not about the science. This is not about the science. I want everybody to know that this is not about medical choices. This is not about HIPAA laws. This is not about changing personal preferences. This is about a private entity that has defined the rules of competition for 2021. And that private entity is the NFL, and they have said, these are the rules we're going to play by. So we're not the ones making the rule. Mike Zimmer isn't the one making the rules, okay? This is coming from the NFL. And if you really want to get into it, I mean, the NFL had to convince 32 different teams, they had to convince 25 different states to let 80,000 people get together this season to watch these guys play football when coronavirus was still going on. Okay, the only way they're going to get to do that is if they put proper protocols in place and if they encourage players to follow those protocols. So there's no middle ground where where the NFL can get approval and we can have this full awesome 2021 season with 100% fans in the room without the NFL putting these rules in place. The team that handles vaccinations well, that handles this new rule correctly, those are the teams that are going to be in the playoffs. Those are the teams that are going to be playing for the Super Bowl because they're going to have limited interruption to their normal practice and game day procedure. So that's what all this is about. It's not about making anybody do what they don't want to do. It's incentivizing them. And if they still don't want to do it, they're free not to. They're just going to have a tougher time at playing, winning football.
No,
And so, Matt,
well,
if you could hop in here, because last year the team seemed to be one of the best in the league at this. Like, people were applauding the Vikings through last year for the way that, you know, we seem to be one of the maybe overly cautious teams as it came to these things. This seems to be a bit of a 180 for us. Like, what do you think's driving that, maybe that shift?
Well, so the difference that Dave went into is the personal choice of the players whether or not to get the vaccine, right? That's what the driving difference is. The NFL has the protocols in place. The protocols for unvaccinated players are the same as they were for everybody last year, right? It was just there wasn't a vaccine available last year, so everybody was unvaccinated, right? So for unvaccinated players, the protocols have not changed. And I imagine that the Vikings are actually still adhering to those protocols very well. I don't think there will be reports of us breaching the protocols. The problem becomes when you're a team like the Denver Broncos last year who followed the protocols, but it left them with a game where they didn't have any quarterbacks who could go into the game, right? And they had to start, I'm forgetting his name, but the practice squad wide receiver who played quarterback
Kendall
for
Hinton.
2 games a week or something.
Right? Of course, Jay knows.
Kendall Hinton, yes.
Jay
well,
knows.
no, people were talking
looking for quarterbacks. Jay's looking for quarterbacks.
People were talking about
man.
this on Saturday.
Yeah.
They were asking who's the Vikings Kendall Hinton, and you know Chaz and others were going around.
So regardless of whether or not the Vikings are following the NFL protocols, which I believe they are, it still puts you at a competitive advantage to have players vaccinated because they wouldn't have to sit out that 5-day window if they don't test positive, right?
Yeah.
So that's the key difference right there, is that it's not that the team wouldn't be following the protocols, it's that the protocols for vaccinated players are different from undervaccinated players, and that's the root of the issue, and that's what we've all been talking about here, right? Mm-hmm. So it incentivizes the team to get vaccinated. Based off of the numbers that came out today, 90% of the NFL have at least one, or at least in the vaccination process, right? And 90% of 90 players is roughly 9 players per team. The Vikings have 70% of their players in that process. 70% of 90 is 63 players, which means we have 27 players who are not in that process, which means we have 3 times the number of players. That's 3 times the number of players who could negatively impact us by missing a week, essentially due to being in the COVID protocol and not necessarily even having to test positive. So that's the competitive disadvantage that our team is at with players not being vaccinated, and that's why it's an issue for us. Just like Rick Dennison now can't do his job as he is because due to NFL protocols, he's not allowed to be a tier 1 personnel in the building. So we had to change his job description, which also puts us at a competitive disadvantage because we lost our offensive line coach the week before training camp, right? It's the same kind of situation where it's not a political thing. It's simply the way the rules are for the NFL, which can operate how the NFL wants, and it's collectively bargained with the NFLPA, and they're binding rules, essentially. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah, and look, if you go to Apple right now, Apple is mandating vaccines for everyone who wants to go in their offices. Facebook is mandating vaccines for everyone who wants to go in their office. So this is a private entity. This is a private businesses making the rules.
And and that point, I don't want to go too far off a tangent, but it's also wild to me to just that whole idea, that premise is something that's become so controversial. Because I remember, I have 2 kids now. I have to show their immunization records before they get to go to school or camp. I had to show all those things before I got to go to university. So just the idea that this has become something is so wound up or ginned up or whatever is just, it's sometimes difficult to fathom, but also, it is also the world in which we live. So,
but I think we all went through it, and all the fans in the chat went through it. We all had to decide. We all had to make that personal decision. For me, it just came down to, look, I'm going to do whatever my boss wants me to do, and whatever my dad wants me to do. And if my boss and my dad had said something differently, then I may have done something differently. But it's you gotta include so many things about this decision, not just your personal health or the people around you. Your career comes into play. How, if you want to go to a island vacation, that might affect things. If you want to get out of the house with your kids, that might affect things.
We know that's the real reason that Flip got his, because Flip can't stop jet setting for anybody. So, once they say you might need to get vaxxed to get on a plane, Flip was just, all right, let's get her done.
Yeah, everybody, comes to that decision. But let's talk about the guys who are making about the most of the opportunities in practice, because we do have some great things going on up at the TCO.
We do.
I do love it. There we go. That is a segue. That is Flip saying enough. Let us move on. And what Flip say goes around here. So we're going to do that. Matt, who's impressed you the most thus far? And, even if you haven't been following line by line, as we said earlier, our man Matt Anderson, he's giving you the Cliff Notes, the Coles Notes, the Spark Notes, whatever I know they're different things for different people. Matt's got you covered. Hop in there, read them. But Matt, you're here with me now, so why don't you tell me who's been impressing you so far with all you've heard,
absolutely.
seen, read training camp?
The timeline's on fire with highlights, so a lot of those are coming from ourselves, Climbing the Pocket Network. Obviously the whole beat there, you see them all throughout your Twitter timeline, right? Justin Jefferson has been the number one standout so far. He's picked up exactly where he's left off. He looks absolutely phenomenal from everything you've seen. So I think he deserves the first shout out. Really interesting, and I'll let Dave cover this in more depth later, but really interesting is what Oli Udoh's been asked to do, right? He might be our starting left guard right now. He also played left tackle when Rashad Hill had an injury issue or was missing some time. So he's seemed to be really in the mix recently. So that's really interesting. You have the corners who, from my understanding, have been pretty up and down. Now they have tough competition, right? Facing Justin Jefferson, who's lit things on fire, and Adam Thielen, who has also made a couple of contested catches. But that is, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the corner situation. Amir Smith,
I know that hurt you, Ryan. Mentioning that Dede been looking good on the sideline. I know that hurt, but I'm proud of you. That's progress. We call that growth.
Well, yeah,
So, speaking of wide receivers, the player who has shocked me the most thus far is KJ Osborne, who's apparently looked great at wide receiver. I have trashed KJ Osborne many times on Climbing the Pocket shows because I didn't like the pick, but I have to give him credit because it looks like he might be a legitimate wide receiver 3 candidate. Maybe Ryan, until our boy D.D. Westbrook suits up and gets practicing fully, maybe he'll take over the spot. But until that point, I'm a little bit excited about KJ Osborne. Actually, that's impressive.
Team captain, baby. That's what happens when you draft college team captains. give it a year.
Yep.
Just give it a year.
Let him develop.
Dede might not make the team right now.
This is Flip right here. Flip is just powering up. All of the draft picks are on the sidelines, and Dede Westbrook isn't playing, like Flip might levitate off the screen right now.
I mean, we got ISM, we got KJ, and we got our man Chad Beebe. Why do we even need a DD? Okay, we didn't draft him. Pay $1 million
Oh
for
man.
what?
Yeah. We could keep Didi and leave BB off the roster.
Dave, hop in because Matt was kind enough to leave the trench talk to you.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So, yeah, how you feeling about what you're seeing, what you've been hearing about the battles that are going on in the trenches? I know they just got pads on, but what are you hearing that's making you excited? But then also maybe what are you hearing that's making you maybe a little less excited than you thought you'd be at this point of things?
Well, I thought Wyatt Davis would be hands down in the running for the number one right guard position going into camp. He is out right now with a bum ankle. Mike Zimmer said today he hopes he's back tomorrow, but he's got a bum ankle. He has not played particularly well in training camp to date. He has not stepped up. I was hoping that once they put on the pads and start legitimately hitting, he could show himself and overcome the gaggle that is at right guard, being Dozier, Samia, and I ask Ryan what happened to Samia all the time. And now Oli Udo. Now what is nice is we got to see today Oli Udo in pads, right? And Oli Udo in pads was a beast. He only got beat once, just once. And they were throwing stunts at him, which last year's line couldn't handle worth a damn, right? And he was picking up those stunts. He was taking on Dalvin Tomlinson and holding his own or pushing him back. In the run game, he had blocked some guy so far back, he ran him into Chaz Surratt, right? 10 yards down the field. He was winning on pass protection, and he was winning on runs, and he was covering everything. He got to speak today. He's a big boy, 6'6", long arms, weighs a ton, right? And he talked about the move from tackle to guard and how moving into a box, right? You have more room on a tackle. You've got a little bit extra time to react. He says, now I've got to use more power and I've got to punch earlier. And you know who's helping him? Ezra Cleveland, right? And Ezra's having a good camp. And when the pads came on, do you know that he pancaked Armon Watts? There's nothing that gets me more excited than an offensive lineman that absolutely pancakes a defensive lineman, right? It is just, I have to go have some me time afterwards. It is so good.
That got, okay, I will say, that got me in so much trouble with Pat Elfline that, it scares me a little bit, but no, I love it. I love what we've seen from the young offensive linemen stepping up so far.
So Matt, I need. I'm gonna go back to you on this one here, because something that's been a bit of I guess a little bit of chatter, and I wouldn't say it's controversy or anything like that, but I think it's something fair for us to maybe explore or dig into. Is folks have talked about the challenges with someone with long arms like an Udo moving to play on the inside, and some of the technical things that he needs to be really sharp on so that doesn't become a problem. Can you maybe break down for us why having longer arms, which is something that we typically look at as being a positive when we're talking about tackles, could then potentially be a bit of a liability as you get, in the interior offensive line?
Yeah. Sure. So it really has to do with what David was saying is the interior offensive line, you're in more of a box. So the length isn't as much to your benefit as it is out on the edge. Out on the edge, an edge rusher first of all, is faster than interior defensive linemen typically, but also has a lot more room to operate with, right? So they can work their way upfield around the corner, or they can cut back inside. So that length really allows you to close the gap more quickly, whereas you start closer to defensive linemen in the first place. The thing that length hurts you with is being able to get your hands up into position quickly, right? The longer your arms are, the harder it is to get your hands from the ground where you start, if you're starting in a 3-point stance, up into somebody's chest. And when you have somebody that's directly in front of you, that really becomes a problem. I think actually, to bring back the offensive line woes of a few years ago, Mike Remmers was a really good example of some of the problems, and his was a technique thing, but he would bring his arms up into his chest and then release them out, push them forward to punch. Okay, and that was a problem because it's pretty much fine when you're on the edge. He's a serviceable, if not great, tackle. You don't want him starting at left tackle in the Super Bowl, which he's done twice, but other than that, he's a serviceable tackle, right? With long arms, his problem is it took him longer to get his arms up, and he wasn't able to control defenders' chests, right? Which is what you want to be able to do as an offensive lineman. The body control, the control of the chest is pretty much the battle between the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman, right? Longer arms, takes longer to get them up. That's where it can become a problem. You can lose leverage, and once you lose leverage, you lost the battle, pretty much. So
awesome. Thank you for that. Flip, you posted a poll. Oh, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
No,
Did you want to add on to
Matt's right. It's all about leverage, and generally low man wins, and interior linemen, especially defensive linemen, are usually small and compact. Look at Michael Pierce. He looks like a bowling ball, right? With tree trunks for legs. If he gets under somebody and stands them up, he generally wins because he can just pump his legs and go. An offensive lineman needs to, and this is something that's changed over the years. Back in the day, we would come up, we'd have one hand in the dirt, and then we'd come up with the other in the forearm. So we could get it, just like Matt said, in the chest, because that's where we're aiming, in the chest and stand him up. Because once the lineman's stood up, I can now put my hands on you, even if it's an offensive lineman, it's interior, and then I can turn you. And as Ole said, it becomes a torque game, right? And it's who turns who and manipulates who. Once they do that, even with the longer arms, it's harder because you're not in that compact little spot. It's an adjustment. But once you do, you can learn to use your leverage of the whole body and the hip and everything and torque even more and be successful. And that's what I'm looking for. But Matt was 100% correct.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Offensive line talk here, getting Dave just all kinds of fired up across all the segments. Flip, you posted a poll from your Twitter account, just kind of talking about which rookies we expected to play the most in week one. Who won that poll? And what was it, Darisaw? Like, is he the guy? Because
yeah.
At what point do we start to get nervous about the lack of reps?
I mean,
should we be nervous? Right now? Okay.
I think we should be nervous if you have a short-term point of view on this, if you're expecting immediate improvement. And I say that because a lot of Vikings fans just less than a week ago would have told you that the Vikings are going to have 2 new starting offensive linemen in week 1 and rookie offensive linemen. And so that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Am I concerned about Wyatt Davis or Christian Darisaw long term? Certainly not. For this year, all I know is that we haven't heard much about either of them. The offensive line coach is basically no longer with the team. And we got the offensive line shuffle where Udo was a tackle, now he's a guard. Davis was a guard, now he's a center. And that all sounds good until you consider the fact that this is the 10th year in a row where they tried to do something like this and it hasn't worked out. So there's concerns there. But overall, you look at, the Vikings made, I think it was 15 draft picks. They made 4 in the first 3 rounds, and we don't We don't, or the 5 in the first 3 rounds, and we don't really project any of them seeing significant time in week 1.
Yep. And
I mean,
if I can jump
I feel
in
like this
there,
is a lot of this, Flip. You're being very I feel like you're being more humble than I'm used to seeing you sometimes, because this is a drum that you tend to beat pretty loudly during draft season, which is that, the draft isn't about the coming year. And if you're thinking about the coming year when you're drafting, that you're probably doing the draft wrong.
Yes.
Given where the team is at and the fact that it doesn't look like we're going to get significant early season contributions, I mean, do you feel vindicated in any way for any of the hate that was thrown your way? Possibly by myself. Probably not me, though. I would never do something like that. But definitely by, like, that Miles guy.
I mean, what's even the point at this point, Jason? Like, no matter what I say, no matter how many times I'm right, you're still going to call me out in the
I
moment.
mean,
Miles is
you're
always
right.
going to come after me. All right. I'm usually right on these things. I keep receipts. I could show them to you, but I don't, because I love you, man. So let's move on. Let's see how they develop.
All right. Let us see how they develop. I mean, I feel like we covered, like, the primary things that we wanted to go over here. So I'm going to put all of you on the spot real quick, because the topic that comes up, probably more than it should, is regression when we talk about Justin Jefferson. He's still looking amazing, doing amazing things. And so we're going to go 1,400 yards. Flip, is Justin Jefferson going to have more or less yards? 1,400 is the number. You taking the over, you taking the under? Where are we going?
Oh man. Wow. There's no reason to change. There's no reason to really change from what we thought he was going to do going into this week. Yes, there's some practices now, but he looks great in them. Even if he didn't look great, I still think you'd have to pick him to go over 1,400 yards. The biggest conversation with the weapons is that Irv Smith has looked really good. And so if Irv Smith is able to be a tight end threat, I think that just makes it even easier for Justin Jefferson. And he repeats, that's me knocking on wood, he repeats 1,400 yards.
Oh, so you're going for a push?
Above.
Okay, so we're over. We're over. Okay,
We're over.
Matt, where are you at with it?
So,
over, under?
I'm going to preface by saying I hate to do this. And I don't believe that Justin Jefferson's level of play is going to decline. In fact, I think it's going to get better. But I will say I would expect Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen to combine for the same number of yards this year as they did last year. But I have to go under on the 1,400 from Jefferson. He's going to see more coverage. It opens up things for Thielen. Thielen gets more yards. Justin Jefferson gets a few less, but it's not because of the level of play. It's simply because of the distribution of, hey, we have 2 phenomenal wide receivers, and defenses are going to cover Justin Jefferson more heavily than Adam Thielen this year, I expect, based off of last season.
All right, so 1 over, 1 under. Dave, you are the decider. Over or under? Justin Jefferson, 1,400 yards.
I think he's going over. He's done things in camp that Patrick Peterson was saying, how in the world did he do that? Patrick Peterson is a future Hall of Fame cornerback. If he can do that to Patrick Peterson, he can do that to the rest of the league, even if he's doubled. But if he's doubled, that opens up for Adam Thielen to do his thing. That opens up Irv Smith, who seems to be a safety blanket, and they're designing plays for him. Kirk Cousins seems to love throwing to him. And then you have, of course, Dalvin Cook. And whoever gets the 24% of throws in the wide receiver 3 spot, be it KJ Osborne or D.D. Westbrook, or a combination thereof. I think we are going to have a bigger offensive production this year. If everybody stays healthy, stays off that stupid COVID protocol stuff, than we did in the past. I think the O-line is going to be better, and I think offense as a whole, and that means Justin Jefferson will do better as a whole as well.
All right, so Flip, Dave, they have carried the day. Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, I'm
Sorry,
the
Matt.
hater, I guess.
Here, you are a hater.
Yeah,
Jim
dude.
says that Justin will have more. We'll have more touchdowns. So, like, either way, if you have him in
I agree
fantasy,
with that.
you should be
I
okay.
think more touchdowns for Jefferson, fewer touchdowns for Thielen, more yards for Thielen, fewer yards for Jefferson. But it all equals out in the end, is what I think is going to end up happening.
Plus, we got the extra game.
They're going to be throwing more often.
Yeah. If we
Okay.
say
Now
yards
you
per
want to
game,
backtrack.
But what if they're resting their starters in the
I'm never
last
gonna
game,
get
Matt?
that right.
I'm cool with that.
Sorry.
Well, all right, y'all, we made it all the way through. We talked about some controversial things.
There's one little bit
People didn't
we
get
forgot.
too heated. What?
We don't need to talk
What was
about
that, Dave? Oh, yes. Jeff Gladney's been cut, but there's not really much for us to editorialize in there. Jeff
No,
Gladney's
other
been
than
cut.
we're going to
He
get
did
some of that
terrible
money
things.
back for the 2022
He shouldn't have been here anymore.
season.
We get a couple dollars back. And
which means we can
yeah,
sign
that's
some
it.
of these one-year wonders.
it.
We
That
don't need to
money's
sign
going
anyone
straight
else.
to Brian O'Neill.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
come
sign
on,
anybody
let's
else.
sign another
Put
DD.
it
Weren't
for
you listening to
O'Neal.
Flip?
Let's sign another DD Westbrook with that Gladney money, so we can just sit on
Listen
the
to
bench
Flip.
and see
Stop spending the
see-
money.
college team captains. It's their time. Cameron Smith on defense. Cameron Smith walking down that linebacker 3.
And
Come on.
could be.
Cameron Smith, Daniil Hunter coming back from neck injury, killing it so far, living in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That should be a T-shirt.
So this year's draft picks are really last year's draft picks. This is what Flip's been trying to tell you. So refamiliarize yourself with who was drafted last year. That's actually your gift for this year. These guys, this year's guys.
I will do a private show if somebody in the comments can list all 18 draft picks from last year right now.
Flip will do live
We will
commentary
get you on the
at a
show.
Vikings game for you. If you could fire him off for us right now. All right. Well, Dave, you're out in front right now, so I'm not really sure how to do this. But Dave, what you got coming up for the rest of the week?
We've got coming up with tomorrow night should be Vikings happy hour, and then Thursday we have the one and only, the fastest run show on the internet, Viking Hot Takes, starring the great Flip Mozzie and Eric Thompson of Daily Norseman. And then we start all over again next Sunday.
Let's do it.
And hopefully Monday we debut CTP Mondays.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Football is close to back.
We got Hall of Fame games.
We'll have actual game to talk about the next time we're here. It'll be good times. Looking forward to it. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on. Viewers, thanks for coming along, participating, all the great comments. And listeners, you listen to this the next day, you should be viewers. Join us. Tuesday, we're live. It's good times. And that's it.
Skol, everybody.
Play the music, David.
Go.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.